Minimalists.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn. Ryan Nicodemus is actually down in Florida taking care of his grandma right now, but that's okay. We have Ramit Sethi in the building, in the studio.
How you doing?
Outstanding. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about some stuff today. You have a book. It's 10 years old now. Congratulations. The second edition is out. It's called I Will Teach You How to Be Rich.
I will teach you to be rich.
Oh, there's no how in there. That's important, because here's the thing. Actually, that's perfect, because I accidentally inserted some words into this title. In fact, I was a bit turned off by the title of the book years ago because I realized I was placing my own judgments on it, because it was, we think of rich, what do we think about? We think of filthy rich.
Right.
I will teach you how to be filthy rich, as opposed to I will teach you how to be rich, or I will teach you to be rich. I found myself inserting some words there. Now, what was the impetus of writing this book? And we're going to dive into some questions here in a moment, but can you talk about why you wrote this a decade ago, and why was it time to revise it at this point?
The reason that I wrote the book was I had been writing a blog for years. I started it when I was in college. And the reason that I started the blog was that I tried to teach my friends about money in college, and nobody came. Nobody wants to go to an event about money. It makes them feel bad about themselves. And so I started writing a blog, and I wanted to write a blog as if you and I were sitting here, just like we are, and we'd be talking about the cheap friend we've got who never tips, and what do I do with $2,000 I've got sitting in my checking account, and what are all these investing things people talk about. I started writing it, making it fun. I started learning. And after I had done that for several years, I treated my blog like a lab, an experimental laboratory. So I was studying human behavior and psychology, and all the money advice out there is very academic. Keep a budget. Don't spend money on lattes. It all sounds nice on a piece of paper until you actually try it in real life. And I didn't want to live a life where I was counting pennies for the rest of my life. So I started this blog, treated like an experimental lab. And after several years, I built a system. I love systems that scaled. What that meant is I could spend less than an hour a month on my money. It was going where I needed it to go. And at that point, people kept asking me the same questions, like the same 20 questions.
Okay.
What do I do with my money? What's the best savings account? Blah, blah, blah. Tell you the truth, the reason I wrote the book was I just wanted to hand it to them and be like, read this. Like, here are the answers to your 5 questions, and the 15 you should be asking, read the book.
Gotcha. Now with this book, to be rich means something different. Last night, we went to a book launch event that you had in West Hollywood, and we sort of did this roundtable where you asked everyone, like, what is their rich life? And it's fascinating because quite often when we think of rich, it's what I just said, is like, what is filthy rich? And you think of opulence. You think of unnecessary splurging on things that probably aren't going to add value to our lives. And what I really liked is you went around and asked people what their rich life was, and some people were like, it means I can go out to dinner once a week, or it means that I'm able to put my kids into a private school, or whatever it might be. And everyone has a different idea of what a rich life is.
Yeah. I think you're 100% right that the title, look, I don't know if I'd name this book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich again. I picked it when I was in college, and I was sober when I picked the name, but it was a punchy title. And let's be honest, if you take a look at a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich with this huge text on the front, I'm not surprised that a few years ago you said, it's not for me.
Because I didn't, like, to me, rich was almost a turnoff, because I walked away from a corporate world personally where I was making good money. I was ostensibly rich, although I was broke, man. I made really good money. I was making a couple $100,000 a year in Dayton, Ohio, and I was living paycheck to paycheck. I wasn't actually rich. I was irresponsible with the funds I was making. And by the way, I wasn't spending on things that brought me greater joy, happiness. I certainly didn't feel like I was living a rich life.
I completely understand. And so what happens is you start doing, maybe you're doing well, maybe you're in debt. It doesn't matter what your financial situation is. A rich life is correlated, although not identical, to how much money you've got. I was rich before I had money. I grew up with 2 parents in America. I went to a great college, and I made great friends. I was rich back then. Then I added money to it. Now, money we should be really clear. Money is an important part of a rich life, but it's a small part.
It's in many ways an amplifier.
I think it's an amplifier. I think so. I think there's this phrase, there's so many phrases in our culture that reveal ourselves. And one of them is, money changes people. And listen to how people say that. Money changes people. Such a disparaging tone. You know what? Of course money changes people. It should change people. It should make you be able to dream bigger than you ever thought. It should make you be able to take something that you didn't enjoy doing or doesn't add value and remove it from your life or delegate it from your life or simply make it go away. Money should change your life, but the common perception is that if I made $1 million, I'm going to start blowing it on this and that, and that doesn't have to happen. That reveals a profound lack of trust in yourself. I always knew, and I know it now, if I made 10 times more than what I make today, it's not like I'm going to go blow it on a bunch of Ferraris that I don't care about. I bought a 4-door Honda Accord when I graduated from college. Like, I'm a sensible Indian dude. But I know that I knew that if I made more money, I would be able to dial into the things that I value. Things like relationships. For example, my wife and I brought our parents along with us on our 6-week honeymoon. We could talk about that.
Really?
Yeah, for part of it, not for all of it. For the first week, and then we're like, have a nice time.
And also, you've updated the book to talk about relationship advice with respect to money.
Totally. And that is another area where as you accumulate money, which again is just a small but important part of a rich life, you can use it to craft your rich life with your partner or with your parents or with your friends. My dream when I started off was just to be able to order a round of drinks for my friends and not have to worry, do I have enough money in the bank? That's a rich life. And then as you make more money, your dreams can get bigger. So yes, money does change people, but it should. And you choose where and how it changes you.
It is an amplifier. When I say amplifier, I mean it can amplify your bad behaviors.
True.
Or it can amplify your good behaviors, right? We often talk about tools, and technology is one of those tools, but a fairly crude analogy is like if you have a chainsaw, you can use it for all kinds of really good things like, oh my God, this tree's about to fall on my neighbor's house. Let me protect them by cutting the limbs off or whatever. Or you can use it to chop your neighbor into tiny little pieces. It really depends on how you use that tool, and money is a tool. I also think that we unfortunately treat it as if it is the most important thing in our lives, and then of course we want to swing away from that, and then we pretend it's not important at all.
100%. We have a very paradoxical culture, which is extremely unhealthy. On one hand, it's so puritanical. People are using words like money changes people or money's evil, it's the root of all evil. That's not even the real quote, but that's what people repeat. And if they made money, they had to step on people to get there. All these phrases that we grew up with. But
well, in last night, you actually had people say, well, when you think of money, what is the first thing you talk about? And I heard words like anxiety or debt,
embarrassed,
struggle. Yeah. And then a few people were like security or
flexibility.
Oh, yeah.
We had a couple yesterday that used my book and my material, and there were a couple, and they said, we love that we can decide, hey, we want to go to Paris next week. Let's go. That is a rich life to them. And that's flexibility. So it's so interesting that in our culture, we talk about all the negative things about money, but nobody sits down and actually talks about the real positive ones. Notice, by the way, that the minute you start talking about the positive, people will immediately drift into the negative. They'll go like this. You go, what could money do for you? What's your rich life? And people will say, I could travel. It's not like I need to go first class everywhere. It's not like I need this or that. They start by saying what they don't want. We love to define ourselves by what we don't do. And what I would challenge people with a rich life is to define yourself by what you do, what you want, and then work backwards from there.
Isn't it fascinating how one person's rich life is another person's sort of misery, right?
Yeah.
I know for me, I really dislike traveling. And so I think about these people who are like, yeah, if I just had $1 million, I could travel the world. I'm like, if I had $1 million, the last thing I want to do is travel the world with that. And that was what was so fascinating about the event last night is people, it wasn't this, you put specificity behind what a rich life is. So let me ask you this. What is your rich life?
My rich life is to be able to never have to make a bad decision because of money. Specifically, never have to work with someone that I don't like or that I don't respect. if that's the case, goodbye. Like, they don't work with me anymore. And that could be an employee, a vendor, place I get coffee from. That's it. It's to be able to travel for 1 month per year with my wife. And it's to be able to create a family trip with my whole family at least once every couple of years, where we just kind of really enjoy, bring the nephews and nieces with us. So those are the things that are my rich life. But I have to tell you, that ebbs and flows over time.
Okay.
Well, like when I started out, 22 years old, it was to be able to order appetizers, because I never got to do that growing up as a kid. Then it was like, oh, I moved to New York. I want to take I want to take a cab during summer because I don't want to walk into a meeting dripping with sweat. I sweat a lot. Look at this body hair. I sweat a lot. And then, your dreams get bigger, right? So then it was, for example, with our honeymoon, this was an interesting example that I didn't even realize how small I was thinking. So my plan when we got married was, I'd been saving for a honeymoon for a long time. One of the things I talk about in the book is the difference between the wealthy and everyone else is the wealthy save before they need to. So I'd been saving for my wedding when I was in my mid-20s, even though I never met my wife until I was in my mid-30s. And same for a honeymoon, engagement ring, all this stuff that is predictable, but you just don't quite know when it's going to happen. Okay. And I show how to do that with these automated savings accounts. So we had planned, like, let's go on a 7 or 8 day safari. That was our plan. Sounds like an amazing honeymoon. I've never been there. And we sat down with a couple of couples, and we told them, and they were a bit older and they'd been married for a while. And they said, oh, that sounds amazing. When we went on our honeymoon, we took 6 months off. And my wife and soon to be wife looked at each other like, who the hell are these people? And then the couple next to them was like, we took a year off. And we walked out of that dinner. We thought they were just normal people like you or me, but we walked out looking at each other like, what? Our first reaction, which is the common reaction when you hear someone spending time or money in a crazy way, you say, that's ridiculous. But then the second place we went was this amazing place called What If? What if we did that? What if we just spent a year abroad? And we didn't want to do a year, but it kind of blew my mind. And it's ironic because I teach people how to dream bigger and how to execute bigger, whether it's money, career, psychology, entrepreneurship. And we started to say, what if we did that? And so that we were now living in a place of imagination. So we started saying 6 weeks, let's make a list of all the places we could go. And we're really bad at geography. So we plotted them on Google Maps. They're like all over the world. We're like, okay, let's dial it back. 6 weeks. And independently, our dream, which we kind of came to on our own, was let's bring our parents with us. Let's bring them to Italy. Italy's safe. Everybody loves cheese, right? And like we can take them to the Vatican. It'll be beautiful. So we brought them. And what was amazing was her parents never even had a passport. So it was a big deal. We brought them with us. We created these magical memories that, we will never be able to experience that exact thing again. And we loved it. And then we went on to Kenya, India, and Thailand. So that was our rich life for that moment in time. And we just absolutely loved it.
And we're going to dive some more into the book. We do have some questions today that I want to get to. Today, we're going to talk about earning income. We'll talk about managing money. We'll talk about financial willpower. I know that's something that you talk about. We're going to talk about some budgeting mistakes, and I think we may even disagree on budgeting a little bit.
Even the word budgeting.
Yeah, I think we might disagree on that a little bit. And we're going to talk more about what it means to live a rich life. And so let's dive into some of these questions here. Our first question is from Renee in Oklahoma City.
So I have $125 a month to save. And I would like to have a recommendation from you all on what is the wisest way to invest or save $125 every month.
Now, this word budget is almost a bad word for you. It's like the worst 4-letter word. Now, I'm a bit of a disciple of Dave Ramsey. We went out on tour with his team last summer. So, and I agree with probably 99% of what he talks about. And the 1% I disagree with are opinions, by the way. And I think where you and I are going to disagree today, if we do, are actually going to be on our own opinions. We're not going to disagree about facts, I don't think, right? And there's a fact here that Renee has $125 a month to save.
Is that a fact?
Exactly. Well, that's a question, right? Is it a fact? Because what I would say is, well, if you have a budget, maybe you would have more than $125 a month to save. So let's talk about this.
Okay. I'll tell you, I love healthy disagreements. So I'm pumped. I love it. And I think that for people listening, it is very revealing because there are sometimes facts that, that are just cut and dry. And then a lot of times there are different ways to look at the same thing. So I don't like budgets for several reasons. Number one, they don't work. When you talk to any American and they know they should keep a budget, and yet they don't. And why is that? Because number one, it makes people feel bad about themselves. And if there's anything Americans are good at, it's avoiding feeling bad. Number two, they don't know how much they owe or how much they spend, but they know it's bad. And so who's going to go through the work of actually writing down this stuff or opening up some account and then looking at it? They might do it for 1 month. They may do it for 2, but after that, it's done. And I've seen this consistently through my own millions and millions of readers. What I prefer is something that is similar, but very different. And that is, instead of looking backwards at what you spent, look forward and say, where do I want my money to go? And so what I do in the book is I recommend some specific percentages. Here's how much you should be saving. Here's how much you should be investing. And this one people really love. Here's how much you should be spending on guilt-free spending. You want to buy a leather jacket? You want to go out to an amazing dinner? Awesome. Be my guest. So I want people to not necessarily look backwards in their spending, but actually look forward. And as part of that, focus on the things they love as part of their rich life. That is much more motivational. It also sticks a lot more than every month looking at what you spent and feeling bad.
It sounds to me like what you're describing is a budget. And so maybe we're just using different vernacular in a way, because I know an app that is really, it's Dave Ramsey's app, the Every Dollar app, which I think sometimes we just don't know where our money is going, right? And I think what you're talking about when you say looking forward is like, okay, if I'm making if I'm bringing home $2,000 a month, how am I going to best spend this money, right? And it sounds to me like Renee is saying, okay, well, of that $2,000, I have $125 left, and now she's asking, what the hell do I do with this money?
I think they're similar, but I don't think they're exactly the same. So if you talk to someone who keeps a strict budget and they track where they're spending it, I bet you they're really good at knowing how much they spend on groceries every month or how much they spend on their car payment. But if you ask them, where do you want your money to go? Where do you want to be in a year or 3 years? What are your values that are being represented through your spending? They will suddenly get very quiet, because it's one thing to know line by line how much you're spending on your car payment and groceries. It's another thing to say, this is my philosophy. This is what I love spending on, and I spend 16% of my money on this area because I love it. But I spend only 3% of my money, or I have no TV because that's not part of my financial values. So there is a subtle but profound difference. Now, I will say that I do encourage people to track their spending for a couple of weeks in the book, but beyond that, I want them to look forward, not only look backward.
Yeah. So with Renee, she says she has $125 left. First thing I would say is, if you're in debt, I would get out of debt, and I'd use that money to pay off debt. That'd be my personal advice, what I would do if I were in her scenario. Now, if Renee is indeed debt-free, where do we go from there?
Well, there's a short answer and there's a longer answer. The short answer is, I would start saving that money and build up about 3 months of expenses. That's a nice emergency fund. Once she's got that built up, which will take her a while, she can then go on and start investing it. And there are nice ways to do that, simple, easy ways, like a target date fund. The longer answer is, I would say, are you sure you have $125 only? I would love to take a look at her spending. I would love to take a look at her income. There are often ways to save hundreds, thousands of dollars, like right off the bat. And I'll tell you some of this stuff in the book, and I have the exact words that you can use. People pay their cable companies, and they don't realize you can call them and negotiate $600 off with one phone call. Same with your cell phone company. Same sometimes often with your rent. Okay, I've done that before in Manhattan. So there's lots of different ways you can make instant savings, and that money can automatically go into a savings account, or in her case, an investment account as well.
And so you can reduce those expenses. You can radically reduce them by eliminating them. Like you said, I'm paying $60 a month for cable, but I watch it 3 times a month. Why am I even paying for this at all? And so instantly you've given yourself a raise. One of the things that Ryan and I often say is that the best way to give yourself a pay raise is to spend less money. Like, that's an immediate pay raise. But then also in the book, you do talk about, like, it's not just about saving money, it's about bringing more money in or finding different ways to increase your income.
There is a limit to how much you can cut. But
Right.
there is no limit to how much you can earn.
Yeah, because if you're spending $20,000 a year right now, you can only cut $20,000 a year.
Yeah, and at a certain point, you've cut to the bone. What's interesting is, I'll just say this one thing about cutting. When people come to me and they say, I've cut to the bone, there's nothing else I can do, I say, okay, what have you done? And they basically say, I've done one thing, and that's it. And so there's usually more than people think they can do, but there is a limit. And I find it much more rewarding and also more mathematically compelling to focus on the earning side. Now, there's a very interesting question about, why don't more personal finance people talk about earning more? The answer is very simple. They don't know how. Most people writing about personal finance, their bread and butter is simply cutting back. And so I wanted to change that with I Will Teach You to Be Rich. That's why we talk about entrepreneurship. We talk about freelancing. We talk about the fact that you can actually, doesn't matter where you live, she lives wherever she lives, you can find clients, whether they're local or whether they're remote. And we have people, we have caricature artists, we have dog walkers, we have Excel consultants, and you can dramatically increase your earnings. Last night, one of the guys who was at the event, he said, I used your YouTube video on salary negotiation. I sent an email and I got a $5,000 raise, right? There are the actual words. You can get them for free on YouTube or on my website or in the book, and you can negotiate massive raises. So people shouldn't forget, I have this thing I call the CEO strategy. Cut costs, yes. Earn more, don't forget about that, and then optimize your expenses, your cable, your cell phone. You can call them up and you can negotiate $500-$600 off right away.
I like what you said about values a moment ago, because I don't want money to be the primary driver for doing what you do. If you're making money just for the sake of making money, that's not very fun. In long term, it's not a rewarding strategy. I mean, you might reward your bank account, but we've all seen, the sort of picture of opulence, like the guy alone in his mansion sort of thing, and like, oh, I don't aspire to be that. What you're talking about is identifying what your values are and then figuring out how money will amplify those values.
100%. And I agree with you. I mean, in fact, when I was in my early 20s, if you had asked me, what do you think about money? I would have said, I want more. And if you had said why, I wouldn't have had a good answer. I might have just said some words, but ultimately it was something that I wanted. And I was willing to work for it, which is good, but there wasn't much thought as to why. And so I think it's an interesting journey, because I came from a family that was very middle class. My mom stayed home with us. My dad worked. Now, having earned more through my business and through investing, I can say that money is important. It definitely allows me to do things and dream bigger than I ever would have. But an extra zero doesn't change anything. Yeah. It really doesn't. And also, just like, if I had another $1 million tomorrow, I would not go out and buy a Ferrari or any kind of, because I just don't care about that. I don't even have a TV. It's not important. My laptop that I run my entire business off of with dozens of employees is a 2012 MacBook Air. And my wife makes fun of me, but it doesn't matter. It works. I like to buy the best and keep it for as long as I can. So I believe in that. But on the other hand, I do have things that I absolutely love and I spend extravagantly and unapologetically on. Those are the things that get me excited. It's not the money in the bank account. It's living outside the spreadsheet and for example, being able to do this and come in here.
But it's not to impress other people.
No.
It's in line with the person that you want to be.
In fact, if anything, like, I'll give you an example, because one of my money dials, the thing that I call it a money dial, I love spending on, is clothes. You will never see...
Now, your wife's a personal stylist, right?
She's a personal stylist, but I loved it before her, but I got a lot more sophisticated once she taught me what she does. And you will never see me wearing some big logo shirt. In fact, if I am successful, my clothes are for me, not for anyone else, and you will never know what brand I'm wearing. Yeah. Never. So as I became more interested in this area of life. It's funny because most of my readers, they follow me when it comes to psychology, careers, etc., but they think clothes are stupid and shallow. It's really funny. And so I get it, because when I was younger, I thought the same, but then I started to fall in love with the craft of like, who's making this? What's the artisan that's creating this sweater by hand? And as part of our honeymoon in Italy, we went to the factory of my favorite brand and saw the artisans creating it and kind of learned about where they come. They have a school there on the property. That to me represents when you truly love something. Like if somebody has 5 BMWs, to me, I don't get it. But to them, they're like, let me show you the torque in this BMW. Let me show you that I went to Germany to pick up my car and drive it on their track. They love beyond showing off. At a certain point, it's not about showing off. It's about finding the value in that thing for yourself.
Yeah, and it's finding the experience
Yes.
that resonates with you. Because I'm with you. Like for me, having 5 BMWs would do nothing. My Toyota's fine for me.
Yep.
Although I did I owned 2 Lexuses at one point back in my corporate
At the same
days.
time?
Yeah, same time. And a Land Rover. And there was nothing wrong with those cars. They were really nice cars and they worked really well, but I didn't actually own them either. I was making the car payment on them every month, and that's a terrible strategy. I would never recommend ever having a car payment. I don't know if you talk about that at all in the book, but
Listen, I have my own rules on money, and one of the things that I would encourage people to do is to create their own rules. So you can find mine online. It's on my Instagram account or everywhere. One of them is, I want to save 20 to 30% every year. And if I'm doing that, then I know that my expenses are basically being handled. Another one is that I want to pay in full for large purchases. A car, I want to be able to pay in full or go in there and pay in full. A trip, a honeymoon, a wedding, I have the money already saved up. I am definitely not going into debt. Then there were a couple of others that surprised people. One of them was marry the right person. I think that's probably the most important financial decision you can ever make. But remember, as I say, money's about living outside the spreadsheet. So yes, you can learn how to automate and invest and all this asset allocation. Yes, you should learn the technical stuff. Most people who complain about money have never spent one weekend reading anything about money. They're 45. Oh, boo-hoo, life is so tough. Oh, systematic inequality. All those things are true. But you never spent 48 hours reading anything about the most important complaint in your life. Get real. So that's one thing. Your relationship is critical. And then another thing is, I wrote a rule saying any flights over 4.5 hours, business class. Now, you might not agree. You might not care. You might think it's a waste of money, or you might not be able to afford it. Any of those things are fine. What I want everyone to do is to create their own point of view. I guarantee someone's going to say, go to this steak place once a month because it's so cool. Like, I don't care about that steak. That's not my thing. But if you love it and you can afford it, God bless. That's what I want everyone to do. Come up with your own point of view and be unapologetic about it.
let's dive into a few of these lightning round questions. So we pick up some questions from Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're at The Minimalists on all those platforms. You're at Ramit on Twitter.
And Instagram.
And Instagram. Nice. And so you can follow him there. You can ask him some more questions on social media. Our first question here. Oh, by the way, we share these in the show notes as well. So what we do is we try to answer with like a pithy, tweetable answer, but really we can ramble on a little bit, and Sean will tweeze out something that sounds good. And then Jessica puts all these in one place, minimalmaxims.com. Our first question is from Nile Chronicles in Istanbul. How can we block the sudden urge to spend our hard-earned savings on shopping, gifts, luxury items, and dining out? Ramit, what can we do to stop the urge?
Don't block your desires.
Yes.
Plan for them and acknowledge them. So,
and I guess maybe what I would say is, are they your desires or are they desires someone else handed to you, right?
Right. Well, that's a whole thing. I mean, many people, especially in America, are buying things that if you probed them why they're getting it, it boils down to, I want to feel good for a couple of hours.
Yeah. I want to spend money I don't have
to
buy things I don't need to impress people I don't even know.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, it's perfectly okay if you say to yourself, you know what, I really want that. Yes, get it. Let me show you how to even dream bigger. So I think for this person, what I'm willing to bet is that they are playing whack-a-mole with their money. So they wake up, they start the month, ooh, I'm motivated, I need to save some money, I really should do that. And then by the end, they're scrolling Instagram, they're reading their emails with links to stuff to buy, and they buy this and they buy that, and they don't even really care about it. I would rather have them sit down and say, you know what do I love? Stop dreaming small, dream big. I want a leather jacket. I'm going to make this up. Maybe I could get a leather jacket from Gap. Dream bigger. Maybe you can get an even cooler leather jacket or something you really love. Okay, great. What's it going to take to get that? I'm going to need to save for X months, and I'm going to discipline myself by automating the money so I don't have to log in every day. And you're building this muscle of discipline, of automation. And at the end, the payoff is you get that thing you truly loved. What a lot of people might discover, which I think aligns a lot with the minimalist philosophy, is I didn't really even want this leather jacket.
Yes. And I think that's ultimately the message of minimalism is you probably don't want that.
And my message is maybe you did. And if you did, awesome. Now you know the work that it takes to get there, and now you can plan for something even bigger next time.
And my pithy answer here really echoes what you were saying is a bad habit is better replaced than avoided. So when you talk about with the whack-a-mole, this person, Nile Chronicles, is saying, well, I want to buy this, I want to buy this, I want to buy this, and I think they're all bad habits. Well, maybe most of them are, but maybe there is something that will truly add value to your life. That's the thing you aspire toward, and the other things are then replaced by that higher quality thing.
Totally agree. Let's take dieting as an example. By the way, dieting, very interesting. When I first wrote this book 10 years ago, I compared fitness and food with finances. And there's obvious links. We don't count calories, we don't count where we spend our money, et cetera, et cetera. This time, 10 years later, I was strongly advised to strip out all recommendations about diets and food. Why? Because it's become controversial to even suggest that people might want to change their body, lose weight, et cetera. And I refused because I've gone on not only my financial journey, but my fitness journey. I used to be 127 pounds, super skinny. I called myself a skinny Indian guy, which is the language we use to describe ourselves is very toxic, right? Some of us say, oh, I could never make money. My family doesn't do that, on and on and on. I had to learn to change the way I describe myself and then get help from teachers and trainers and things like that. So in the book, I talked about, again, the similarities between fitness and finances. And one of the things you'll see people when they're going with their plate, they're fixated on how many carbs should I have? Ooh, pasta's really bad for you. That's one way to look at it. Let me try to take away the bad. Another way to look at it is let me start with the good. Let me add a little bit more lean protein. It's okay if I want to have dessert, no problem. But I'm going to start by filling my plate up with what's good. And that is totally applicable to finances. If this guy is worried about all these bad, quote, bad things, I don't even like using the word bad, these things that he tends to overspend on, maybe he can start by saying, what is the thing I love? Let me focus on that. And the natural overspending areas will disappear when he's focusing on what his rich life is.
Yeah, I often think about we're fixated on all of the negative. You're probably going to get a negative result there. We got another question here from our lightning round. Lee Sophia from Washington State asks, how did I get into this mess with all my credit cards? I just give you a pithy answer here. A ditch is dug one shovelful at a time. I mean, that's ultimately, you probably didn't go out and get 10 credit cards. What is it? The average American has 4 credit cards. 1 in 10 Americans has 10 or more active credit cards in his or her wallet. And you probably didn't go out overnight and have 10 credit cards, say, I'm going to max them out tomorrow. It happened one shovelful at a time. That's how you got to a ditch. I'll give you a second pithy answer here. Every foundation was once a ditch. And so you might be in a ditch right now, but this could be your future foundation. You might be at your breaking point.
Love that. Mine is, the problem is not credit cards. The problem and the solution is you. The credit cards, if it wasn't the credit cards, it would have been something else. The real opportunity here is to look at why you opened them up. Go back and get really specific. What happened on that 6th credit card? Somebody came to you when you were shopping at Banana Republic and said 10% off. Oh, 10%, that's such a great deal. You saved $4 opening that credit card. Why are you bothering? Most people are asking themselves $3 questions. They really should be asking themselves $30,000 questions. That's the real problem, I almost guarantee. This guy's going around trying to save $4 or, oh, I got a 10,000 mile bonus for opening up this airline card. stop thinking at the $3 level. Close those accounts. It'll hurt your credit for a little while, but they will recover. Focus on 1 or 2 great credit cards, cash back, travel. Keep it simple and focus on changing your psychology away from $3 questions to focusing on $30,000 questions like investing.
The thing I would say about credit cards, we'll wrap it up on this, is if you're in debt, you don't need credit cards. I mean, and then we could obviously have an argument about whether or not they're beneficial if you're out of debt. We can have different opinions on that, but if you want to get out of that ditch, stop digging. And the first way to do that is like you gotta get rid of these credit cards. Got to get them under control. I know for me, I had massive amounts of debt. I made really good money, but spent even better money. And so I had 6 figures worth of debt, and I had 14 active credit cards, and the car payments and the mortgage on the oversized house with more toilets than people. Like I had all this stuff that wasn't bringing me joy, satisfaction, a sense of meaning to my life.
You know, can I tell you something? Like when you say that and I hear you, and I can just see it in your face, like it looks like hell to me to just have all this stuff around. And I want to just contrast the name of the book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, with this idea, as you said, of opulence. My rich life, I've lived in the same apartment for 10 years. It's a 1-bedroom apartment. I love it. It's very nice, but my net worth has increased over the last decade, and I stayed. I picked the best, and I stayed there. I picked the best computer, and I kept it. On the other hand, so that's not important to me. I actually was driving around LA, and I saw these massive houses, and I didn't feel like I want that. Not at all. I felt like, oh my God, that's a lot of maintenance. Like, who's going to clean the dust off that? I don't want it.
Yeah, but also you can appreciate it. And that's what I like about your perspective is it's just like if you go to the LACMA and you see a Picasso painting, you can enjoy it without having to consume it.
That's right. Yes, and that is really when you start to understand your own desires and acknowledge them. It's like, I appreciate the beauty and the art and the craft, but that's not for me. On the other hand, there are things that I absolutely love and I save or invest to be able to enjoy them. And some of them are physical material goods. Some of them are, like you said, experiences. So I want everyone to be unapologetic about what they love, but also know that just because your net worth increases, you don't have to buy another car, Land Rover, new apartment, new computer. You can keep that stuff as it is. You can focus like a laser on the stuff you want.
Yes, indeed. We got several more surprise questions here. What are your opinions about using credit cards to accrue points? What investment recommendations do you have for those seeking early retirement? We could talk about that. If a house payment is the same as a rent payment, could that be considered good debt to take on? We actually might disagree on that one. That'll be fascinating. If I'm going to college, is it wiser to continue investing in my retirement accounts or invest instead in my education and minimize my school loans? And finally, how should I prepare financially to leave an unsatisfying job that provides a comfortable living to instead pursue a more satisfying career? And if you want to hear all that, you can listen to this week's Maximal episode, available exclusively on Patreon. That's right, you're currently listening to our weekly Minimal episode, but each week we record an entirely different, much longer Maximal episode on the Minimalists private podcast, which gives us the private space we need to talk about stuff we don't usually talk about in public. Plus, Patreon is the best way for us to fund this podcast and keep it 100% advertisement free. When you subscribe to the Minimalists private podcast on Patreon, you'll also receive a personal link so that our Maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You'll also get access to our entire back catalog of more than 100 private podcast episodes. Find all the details and all the good stuff, including an additional private podcast episode every week over at theminimalists.com/support. And now, here are some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners.
Hi, I'm Carrie from Denver with a tip about answering the "what do you do?" question. I love your advice about answering that question by saying what I'm passionate about, but I found that my answers were being dismissed a little bit, maybe because I'm a stay-at-home mom and there's a little bit of like an entitled stigma attached to that role. So I tweaked my response. Now I answer with, I work really hard at maximizing the things that matter most to our family. I'm an ambassador of purposeful living, so to speak. And then I go on to talk about writing and camping and the other things that I'm passionate about and ask the other person what they are passionate about. It's opened up some really incredible conversations, and I'm so grateful for your advice.
Hi, my name is Tracy Willis, and I live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I have a comment. I was listening to your Vermont show, and somebody asked about children and how to be a minimalist with all the stuff that comes with that. And I wanted to share a couple of tips. I have a 1-year-old, and we started our minimalism journey when I was 7 months pregnant before she was born. And a couple of tips I have learned over the last year or so is are as follows. For gifts, ask for passes or memberships to local museums, zoos, gymnastic centers, etc. These get you and your child out of the house and engage you in your community. There's also extra perks, discounts, or special events for members that come with those passes, and it's a really great way to do it. Another thing is oftentimes children under 2 are free for those, so really your membership only includes you, maybe your other family members or plus ones. As far as toys go, rental services exist in many places. Our local library, for example, has a toy lending service, so you can rotate toys out and take them back without cluttering up your space. There are also online subscription services that are similar. One local one for us is called Bloom Box, and it has really beautiful toys and educational activities that go along with them that you rent for a month and send back. Another thing about toys is that I've found is designating a space in your home to keep those toys so that they're not ending up everywhere around the house. Really helps you to kind of manage what you actually have. And once that space fills up, you can get rid of those toys or let go of toys. Toys can also be donated if they're in good condition to daycare centers, children's hospitals, shelters, etc. You can also sell them at stores like Once Upon a Child. As far as clothes, I've found going for secondhand is very helpful, as many of the clothes get ruined or messy anyway. Often also the child grows out of clothes before they're able to wear them very much, so it's nice to not have spent a ton on it. And no matter what, baby clothes are pretty much cute because they're tiny and cute. ThreadUp is another great website that I've used to buy things that are in great condition, as well as Once Upon a Child. And then finally with accessories, try a packing party with your bottles, your towels, your bibs, anything that isn't like the toys and everything. And if you don't use those things in 21 days, you probably don't need them.
All right, y'all. Thanks again to Ramit for joining us today. Make sure you check out his book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. You can also find him online. IWT.com is his website. And real quick for right here, right now, here's one thing that's going on in the life of the minimalists. If you like coffee, if you like good coffee, Ryan and I own a coffee shop down in St. Petersburg, Florida, or at least we're partners in a coffee shop with Joshua and Sarah Weaver, our friends down there. And until recently, the only place you could get our coffee was in the 4 walls of the coffee shop. But now it's available online. And each month we're doing something called the Minimalist's Choice. It's our favorite coffee that we're roasting and drinking right now from Bandit. So if you want to find that, you just go to theminimalists.coffee. theminimalists.coffee. You can find the Minimalist Choice, our favorite coffee of this month, if you want to check out our coffee and see what we are drinking. Also, if you want to check out our favorite coffee houses throughout the United States and worldwide, we just put a list, and it's a growing list as well. You can find that at theminimalists.com. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. It's called The Minimalist Favorite Coffee. All right, if you have a question, comment, or minimalism tip for our podcast, leave us a voicemail, 406-219-7839, or send a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. You can comment on this episode at youtube.com/theminimalists. And if you want our show notes in your inbox, then sign up for our email list over at theminimalists.com. And you'll also receive our Simple Sunday emails each week. For our added value this week, let's listen to our pal Matt Carney's new old song. This year is the 10th anniversary of Matt's second album, City of Black and White. It's my favorite of his 6 albums, and he's currently bringing new life to songs from that collection by stripping them down to their beautiful bones. When I reached out to him, he told me that he, quote, went minimal with this project. Here is the revisited, reprised, and reassembled, stripped-down title track for Matt Carney's City of Black and White. And if you leave here today with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll see you next time.
The Minimalists.